Sherlock Holmes and the Problem of Pantalone's Understudy.
The full details of my good friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes' life are scarce, to be sure. Nevertheless, his brief mentions of his early life and extended family paint a loose biographical picture of the detective. In my story, His Last Bow, I placed Holmes' birth year at 1854. Holmes himself claimed that his ancestors were country squires, and that his grandmother was sister to the French artist Vernet, without ever clarifying whether it was Claude Joseph, Carl, or Horace Vernet. Holmes' brother, Mycroft, 7 years his senior, was a government official. Mycroft had a unique civil service position as a kind of human database of all kinds of government policy. While he lacked Holmes' interest in physical investigation, he preferred to spend his time at the Diogenes Club. Holmes told me that he first developed his methods of deduction as an undergraduate. His earliest cases, which he pursued as an amateur, came from fellow university students. A meeting with his classmate's father led him to adopt detection as a profession, and he spent several years after university as a consultant before financial difficulties led him to accept lodgings with me, Dr. John H. Watson. Our lodgings, a small apartment at 221B Baker Street, at the upper north end of the street, up 17 steps. Holmes worked as a detective for 23 years, with me assisting him for 17. We were roommates before my marriage in 1888, and again after my wife's untimely death. Our residence was maintained by our landlady, Mrs. Hudson. Holmes' clients varied in those years from the most powerful monarchs and governments of Europe to wealthy aristocrats and industrialists, to impoverished pawnbrokers and governesses. As I began to work on and publish stories about Holmes' adventures, he rapidly became well known as a detective, so many of his clients asked for his help instead of or in addition to that of the police, for which Scotland Yard was forever grateful. Holmes was an eccentric with no regard for contemporary standards of tidiness or good order. In fact, Holmes had to often dive into an apparent mess to find a relevant item, to solve a case. The detective starved himself at times of intense intellectual activity, and while he was usually dispassionate and cold, during an investigation he becomes animated and excitable. He had a great flair for showmanship, preparing elaborate traps to capture and expose a culprit, often to impress observers as well. I did not exactly condone the detective's willingness to bend the truth or break the law on behalf of a client, lying to the police, concealing evidence, or breaking into houses. But I do feel at times it was morally justifiable. But I did condemn Holmes' manipulation of innocent people. He seemed to derive great pleasure from baffling police inspectors with his deductions, and had supreme confidence, bordering on arrogance, in his intellectual abilities. While the detective did not actively seek fame, and was usually content to let the police take public credit for his work, he was always pleased when his skills were recognized, and responded positively to flattery. Except for my company, Holmes avoided casual acquaintances. He once told me that during 2 years at college, he made only one friend. He was never a very sociable fellow. As shooting practice during a period of boredom, Holmes would decorate the walls of our Baker Street lodgings with a patriotic VR for Victoria Regina in bullet pocks from his revolver, and he often would relax to music, particularly opera. Holmes occasionally used addictive drugs, especially in the absence of stimulating cases. He used cocaine, which he injected in a 7% solution with a syringe kept in a Morocco leather case. Although he also dabbled in morphine, he expressed strong disapproval when he visited an opium den. Both drugs were legal in 19th century England. As a physician, I strongly disapproved of my friend's cocaine habit, describing it as the detective's only vice. I was concerned about its effect on Holmes' mental health and intellect. And while we both smoked tobacco, cigarettes, cigars, pipes, it was Holmes who was positively addicted to the stuff. I occasionally criticized the detective for creating a poisonous atmosphere in our confined quarters. Holmes was known to charge clients for his expenses and claimed any reward offered for a problem solution. Although when I first met him, Holmes needed to share the rooms at 221B Baker Street, by the time I wrote the final problem, his services to the government of France and the royal family of Scandinavia had left him with enough money to retire comfortably. As I detailed in his last bow, Holmes retired to a small farm on the Sussex Downs and had taken up beekeeping as his primary occupation. It was in the cold December when Holmes summoned me to his Sussex farm by telegram, claiming to be lonely and asking me to spend a week in his company. As I entered his stone farmhouse, the temperature quickly shifted from below freezing to that of the tropics. The place looked like a jungle too, a giant stone greenhouse with large windows and skylights, and plants and flowers and birds and bees. Thank you for coming, Watson. You see that I have learnt to bring the outdoors indoors. You might be best to take off your coat and hat. Why, yes, Holmes. I didn't realize it would be so warm in here.
You are just in time, my friend. I have been waiting to open this telegram until you arrived.
When I'm here, Holmes, do you mind if I hang up my coat and sit down? It's been a long train ride.
You may hang your coat over there, and there's a chair behind that beehive.
Quite beehives indoors, birds, trees and flowers. All right, Holmes, I'm settled in. Open it already and tell me what it's all about.
Ah, it is good news, Watson. Very good news.
Tell me, Holmes.
You and I, my friend, are going to the opera.
Oh, that is good news, but certainly not something to send a telegram about.
We, my friend, have been cast in the Royal London Opera's production of Adriana Lecouvier.
Adriana Locke, cast? Why, I sang in the choir as a child, but I'm certainly no opera singer.
Nor I, my friend. I am the understudy to a silent character named Pantalone.
Oh, well, that sounds like something right up your alley, commedia dell'arte.
Quite. And you, my friend, are cast in the chorus.
But I told you I cannot sing.
Do you think that every actor on the stage at the opera is actually singing, Watson?
Well, I thought they were.
No, Watson. In crowd scenes, such as a village, or as in this opera, the backstage at a play within a play. No, Watson, you will just stand in the crowd and mouth as if you were singing, to fill the stage.
Oh, I see. Ingenious. But Holmes, I don't understand. What is this all about?
Forgive me, Watson. Inspector Lestrade contacted me and told me of a coincidence that could not be a coincidence.
And?
Not one, but two understudies have died during the rehearsal process of Adriana La Cavaliere. Both were backstage. Both were during the production. And both were understudies for the actor playing Pantalone while he was on stage. One seemed to be an accident, where the actor tripped, going down a flight of stairs, in between the lounge and the stage. The second was found hanging from the rafters after the production and curtain was closed, and the sets slid off to the side. The inspector would like us to pose as actors in this opera, which is opening in only 2 weeks in London. We shall have to leave immediately. You will come with me. We will travel back and forth by train.
Why don't you just stay with me in London? You'll be able to take a carriage or a cab.
Well, first of all, I need to take care of my bees, dear Watson, and my birds and ducks and chickens, my 3 dogs, my cat. I have a greenhouse to maintain. And secondly, the long ride via train compartment will allow you and I to compare notes each day as we travel back and forth.
And so we did. Holmes barely spoke during the long train ride, content to suck on his calabash, which contained a split of tobacco and hashish. I scolded him for bringing such smoke into our train compartment, to which he simply replied that it helped him to think more clearly, and while it might dull the senses of others, it made him acutely aware of his surroundings. The rehearsal process was very strange. The director never addressed anyone, nor spoke at all, merely whispered into the associate director's ear, who then would leap up and pronounce the right and wrongs, the left and rights of the actors and singers' movements and voices.
We're going to go ahead and do that again. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we're starting from Grazie.
So, gentlemen, you're off stage. You're entering. Strike the precedent. And the is it's going to take a lot longer. It's bad Hollywood music. And as soon as you're done, go upstage and post. Upstage, downstage,
Penelope! La cameriera! Cento Luigi! Caro! La cera e molle! Meglio! Con suoi caratteri! Ma contraffatti! Pessimo segno! Leggi! M'offusca gli occhi lo sdegno!
Allora.
Holmes had asked me not to speak at all, simply to nod in agreement whenever I was looked at, but to keep a sharp eye and ear to all around me. He was equally quiet, ignoring almost everyone, content to sit in a corner and silently watch the proceedings. A piano player, a conductor, the singers, the actors, all performing at full energy and volume in a tiny, cramped rehearsal hall. At times, Holmes would disappear, slipping out the door, and I would follow. He would go in and out of the dressing rooms and forage through each performer's personal belongings. I kept my distance and hid in the shadows. Holmes was quiet and pensive the entire train ride back to Sussex. Once we arrived back at Holmes' farm, he became animated and turned to me with vigor.
Well, Watson, what do you think of our opera so far?
Well, we've had nothing to do but just sit and watch. No one knows our names. They're completely ignoring us. Why, the director looked right through me.
Exactly my plan, Watson. Stay quiet, invisible, a shadow on the wall.
These two deaths seem completely unrelated.
Chlorophyll gumballs, Watson.
What?
Chlorophyll gumballs.
Chlorophyll gumballs, Holmes?
It is often necessary to use a substitute, such as a chlorophyll gumball, to catch a rat in a maze. In my searches backstage and through the dressing rooms, I have found my chlorophyll gumball. I now only need to find my rat.
Well, what do you think of the opera so far?
Well, it was only my first rehearsal, Watson, but Adriana Lacaviere is a minor opera, completely overblown, to 4 acts, and based on an equally weak 1849 play. It was first performed November 6th, 1902, in Milan. The first act is brilliant, the act you and I are involved in. But I cannot see what Pantalone is doing in an opera about Adriana.
Yes, I know she was an actual woman, the first actress to perform in natural tones.
Precisely, and everyone was in love with her. But after that, the opera falls apart, with the last 3 acts being merely an overblown triangle, ending with the unlikely poisoning of Adriana by smelling some flowers. But just like the play within a play, in this opera, there is more intrigue going on backstage than could ever be seen by the audience on stage.
For the next 2 weeks, we travelled by train from Sussex to London, and sat and watched rehearsals progress, never being addressed, never having anything to do but watch quietly and stay out of the way. Before each rehearsal, a small, beautiful Indian woman would come in and bring tea to all of the actors. She was quite polite to everyone, including myself, and yet was cold and distant to William Corwin Brown, the actor playing Pantalone. In fact, she would look right through him, walk past him as if he wasn't there. Then she would turn and smile at Holmes, and brush up against his knee lightly, for which he would return a smile and a nod. William Corwin Brown was once a highly successful actor, internationally known as one of the great Hamlets. Now he was forced to play the fool, the Polonius, the Pantalone, and he seemed to resent it. At one point I overheard him complaining to thin air. He often talked to himself and quoted Shakespeare.
But this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon 'gainst self-slaughter. Fie on it. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed, things rank and gross in nature possessed merely. That it should come to this, but a mere Pantalone. Fie.
There was one particular time, the day before the final dress, when Holmes disappeared up the stairs to the dressing room. I followed. It was during the performance. He walked past the men's dressing room to the women's. He stepped inside and closed the door. I rushed over and leaned in. My dear Patel, you know I love you. I love you more than anything. Please marry me. Please be my wife.
I'm sorry, I love you too. I love you too. But I cannot marry you, for you are not the main actor. You are merely an understudy. What do you have to offer me?
Patel, please. I'll kill myself. I'll kill myself if you won't marry me.
Go ahead and kill yourself. What do I care? I have a man. I have a man who will take care of me. He takes good care of me. I don't need you.
That's it. I'm going to kill myself, Patel. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. And from Sherlock Holmes, the man who was so cold to even Irene Adler. How could this be? On the night of the final dress rehearsal, Holmes came to me and instructed me urgently. Now listen carefully, Watson. This is my plan. You must follow it to the letter. The play will begin at 7:30. Pantalone makes his entrance immediately. At this point, I want you do not enter the stage until 10 minutes past. In that time, I want you to go to the ladies' dressing room and stand outside the door. And listen, don't fail me. You must be there. Do you understand? Yes, Holmes. I'll do as you say. Patel brought the usual tea. She once again nodded to me politely, ignored William Owen Brown, and coyly flirted with Holmes, who reciprocated. The actors were called to the stage. At 7:30, the curtain rose, and the hustle and bustle of actors running across the stage began to the music of Adriana Lacaviere. Pantalone entered, sat on a chair, at a table, opened a bottle of wine, poured it into a glass and began to drink. Quickly, the stage manager in the play rushed to him and shoved him out of his chair. Thinking nothing of it, Pantalone walks with his bottle in his hand and sits down on the other side of the stage to contently drink. Bow to the prince. Salute a statue of Moliere's head, placed judiciously in the center of the stage. And finally, to climb the stairs to the stage upon the stage, to rehearse his part within a part. Confused? I was, until I realized that that was not William Owen Brown on stage, but Sherlock Holmes, playing Pantalone. I must admit, he did it much better than Mr. Brown. More animated, more lively. He added little comic bits that made the audience laugh, where there was silence when Brown performed. I knew that Holmes was a great actor, but I didn't think he was this good. In all the confusion, I almost forgot that I was to go to the ladies' dressing room. I rushed there at once and stood outside the door and listened.
I see the sleeping portion has worked. And now you are asleep. And now I can slit your throat.
Just then, Holmes came running down the hallway and into the ladies' dressing room in full Pantalone costume and makeup.
Hold it right there, Patel. Put down that knife.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes, I switched those cups of tea that you gave us with Mr. Brown. He is the one sleeping in that chair, whereas I performed as Pantalone on stage and got off just in time to catch you in the act. Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard should be here any moment to take you away in handcuffs.
Holmes, you mean that this is the person who murdered those two men and almost murdered you? I mean him?
Yes, Watson. You see, Miss Patel, that's not her real name. Her name is Rananesh Mohammed Smith. You may remember reading about this. She was married to Colonel Smith. There were rumors of spousal abuse, beatings and the like, and that he threatened her with a gun the night she stabbed him. While Her Majesty's court might find that she was innocent on the grounds of self-defense, a jury in India found her guilty, the prosecutor stating that she had waited in the dark for her husband to enter the room before stabbing him in the back, and that no gun was found on the premises. She was sentenced to death, Watson. When she was taken from the courtroom back to the jail, she somehow escaped.
And this is that woman?
Yes, Watson. She had hidden in a trunk, poked with holes, via a steamer to Britain. Eventually, she found a job here at the opera. She was in a relationship with William Owen Brown, who, knowing who she was blackmailing her and forcing her to help him murder any understudy who came within his reach.
But why, Holmes? What possible motive could he have?
Owen resented being considered a has-been and thought that his talents were being wasted, playing a silent character, a fool, a drunk, and the like. In fact, in his early years, Owen was such a great actor that John Barrymore himself was his understudy as Hamlet, before going on to play Hamlet himself to great acclaim and fame. This always bothered Brown. He could never get over the fact that he wasn't chosen to play Hamlet on film or on the Broadway stage, or even the West End, and was resigned to play the provinces.
And so he had her kill his rivals while he was on stage, to divert suspect to him.
Precisely. Ah, look, Mr. Brown seems to be waking up. As soon as Inspector Lestrade arrives, we will have him. Perhaps we better tie him up, and the girl as well, until the inspector arrives. Then I need a rest in the lounge before I go on for my bows in Act 4.
Sherlock Holmes and the Problem of Pantalone's Understudy on The Joe Bev Show. Like what you hear? Go to Amazon.com and search for Joe Bev.